evening. This is John and Felicia Edmerson, and we are elated to be with you tonight on yet another episode in our LA Family Life podcast. And we're excited tonight to have a couple that we've had the privilege of serving with and loving and being loved by for, let's see, almost 30 years. It's hard to imagine that it's been that long. But the Mays are a great encouragement to our fellowship in many ways. So let's go ahead and bring them in. And this is Willie and Terri Mays. And of course, you have John and Felicia Edmerson, and we're at the Figueroa Church of Christ. This session is part of our podcast series that we're doing to reinforce our theme on reviving the family. And that's our theme for April, May, and June. All right. So let's go ahead and bring in the Mays, and we'll get started on tonight in just a moment. Okay. All right. There they are. Hey, Willie and Terri, how are you?
Doing well. Thank you, John and Felicia. Great to see you all.
Doing well.
Wonderful. So how are things going down in the great state of Texas?
We are cool thus far. It's not too hot, so we're enjoying it, but it's not like California where it's sunny all the time.
Right. Yeah. Tony says it never rains in Southern California.
Amen.
God's changing it on y'all here lately, though.
Right. Right. So let's get to it tonight. We'll be at it about 50 minutes or so. So as we get started, how about if we begin with your marriage? How long have you guys been married? And what about some of your thoughts around marriage ministry and ministering to couples?
We've been married 37 years now. Is that correct, honey? Amen. I even got that right. Yeah.
Very good.
37 years. So 37 years, and we have dated before that for 5 years. So actually, we've been together for 42 years. Started in the 8th grade. And then you said, I started in the 8th grade. So we've had to learn a lot. God has carried us through much learning. So, and then you said, what was the second part of your question?
Ministry.
As far as ministry?
Mm-hmm.
What did you say?
Well, as far as our marriage ministry,
right,
it's probably quite different than maybe what you expected. Our marriage ministry is encouraging people how to trust God through the difficult seasons. So it's been a different type. We often tell people this is not no mushy, everything has been wonderful, peachy cream kind of a ministry. We talk to people who struggle in marriage.
But Brother Mays, how long have you been in the ministry? How long have you been preaching?
That's a long time, over 20-some years, 25 years
or
so.
It's longer than that, you think?
It's probably longer than that.
Right.
Yeah, 25, 30 years. Let's say 30, and we'll leave it at that.
All right. To our viewing audience, you're encouraged tonight. This is actually a live podcast. If you're catching us after the fact, we missed you. But if you're watching us live, go in on Facebook, go in on YouTube, where you put in those comments. We'll actually see them here real time, and we can incorporate responding to your question or your comment in our broadcast. At least that's the plan. So for those who are watching, maybe you want to give us a shout out, maybe it's something you want clarification on. We want this to be as interactive as possible. All right, but we'll go ahead and get started. And I'm going to ask Felicia if she would to read that first talking prompt that we have. All right, so give me just a moment and I'll see if I can bring it up on the screen. All right, so that's a nice little PowerPoint thing we developed. All right, and the first question is, all right.
Okay. Are problems in a marriage inevitable? If so, why do we act so surprised or so prideful when we encounter those, and when or if we encounter those problems?
Great question. Great question. Well, when we stop and we just think about it, when we took our marital vows, the minister said to us, do you take this person for better, for worse, for richer, for poor, in sickness and in health? He didn't actually say this, in tough times as well as in smooth times. So are problems inevitable? I think problems are just as natural in marriage as they are in life. We should expect problems in marriage. And when you, shall I go further? Yeah, we should expect problems in marriage because we're two different people who were reared in different settings. So now when we both come together, it's meshing that family, not just the two of us, but even our family backgrounds and all of our experiences are coming together. And so are they inevitable? I don't think so. I think that that's something that we continue to work at. Life is full of problems, full of challenges, but we looked at them as opportunities and not just as obstacles.
Okay. We have heard over the years kids who talk about their parents. Oh, I never saw my parents fight, or I never saw my mom raise her voice. And whenever I hear that, in the back of my head, I'm like, man, surely that was happening and you just didn't see it. As if to say that there's ever a moment where a couple who's bringing two lives together aren't going to have some friction around any number of things. So I think in that sense, having a problem or having challenges can be a good thing. Now, I don't think they need to be at the point to where, we're contemplating separating, but to say that there's not going to be any issues, like you're saying, well, I don't think it's a wise move. I think we need to go, or maybe should we go into marriage expecting that at some point we may have some difference of opinion. So let's prepare now on how we're going to potentially handle that. Would that be a way to counsel younger couples as they're going into marriage?
Yes. John, I just literally talked to a girls' Bible class yesterday, and I believe both of our advice to people is get premarital counseling.
Oh, wow.
And in your premarital counseling, be prepared if the counselor says, y'all shouldn't get married, or
right.
or y'all need to wait,
right?
Because you have some problems you need to work through. You need to figure out have some more tools or some more strategies, because if you take those problems into your marriage, you will have more problems.
Now, Brandon Mims has said, I've never seen Brother and Sister Mays fight.
That's because you don't live here, Brandon.
Or either you haven't been in the same space with us. How about that?
Hey there, Brother Patrick. He just gave us a shout out. Two fine couples, and he's all the way from Chickasha. So good to hear and to see so many people who we love so dearly. All right. Okay. So do you agree, sweetie, the problems are inevitable and we just need to kind of expect them? So from the beginning, you knew I wasn't some perfect guy. You knew I was going to have some things that needed to be refined and polished. And
right. But I, like Terry said, and Brother Mays said, that you have to have premarital counseling. We did have premarital counseling, and the idea is to go into marriage knowing that it's going to be a fight, and you have to contend for the marriage. Like Paul says, contend for the faith. You got to contend for the marriage. So it is. Our attitude, it is a fight, and I don't want to get knocked down.
And Felicia, we did not have premarital counseling. We didn't have premarital counseling. We didn't have anyone in the congregation helping us. We were just living. And
how old were you all when you got married?
20.
20.
So 20 right right out of junior college. And the reason I say that our ministry is not like probably some of the people that you've had on the call. Our ministry, we both will tell you, we would not recommend doing it the way we did. You know, the reason we are still together is because of our commitment to God first. And that commitment to God kind of forces you to, when you are dedicated to God, it forces you to think differently and do some things differently and make choices to stay together. Because, you know, we've definitely gone through some trials where we could have ended this. So the premarital counseling is definitely something that we recommend.
Yeah, later in our podcast series, we're going to actually have a session. Let me go ahead and plug it now quickly, where we're going to look at a book called His Needs, Her Needs from Dr. William F. Harley. And the basic thesis of the book is that if you'll agree to meeting each other's 5 basic needs, the likelihood of your staying married is in the 90 percentile. And so it is a way to think about marriage. So that'll be coming later in our series. Okay.
And you'll see that in your premarital. If you're doing any type of Christian counseling, I'm sure your Christian counselor will actually have you to go through that book.
Correct. Yeah.
That's the book that they have you to go through.
Good. All right. And Jason Mills says that y'all told me that. So he definitely is amening. It's good to see my aunt on the call tonight. She says in the marital vows, happiness is not included. It's not included. Very insightful. All right.
Very insightful.
All right. So let's go back. Let's see here to our questions. Number 2, what is the healthiest way to address blame or culpability? What is the healthiest way? Now that's a question that I want to spend just a little time explaining. First of all, the word healthiest is critical. We're not interested in vilifying or demonizing someone because they've made an error. What's the healthiest way to address blame? So let's say I've done something. I've admitted that I've done it. So as the spouse who has to decide how to respond, like in our situation, it would be Felicia responding to me. What would be the healthiest way for her to address that whole scenario? Now she's upset, rightly so. So what are some things that she can think about in terms of figuring out, okay, how am I going to deal with you?
Right. So we know murdering is not a choice. So so what are some healthy ways?
Wow, Willie, did you hear that?
Yes. Right? I think she's good. Right? I think that's good. You know, you sound like God. You know, that wasn't his first move. So when you go back to the creation account, because I think that's where we start at, and when you look at your question, now say it one more time, John. Make sure that I got it exactly right.
No problem at all.
And I'll repeat it. Okay. So what is the healthiest way to address blame or culpability?
Right. So let's do the flip side. Let's just think about this. When you look back at Genesis, when God addressed Adam and Eve, God did that. First of all, he asked a question. Where are you? In King James, where art thou? So he asked them, where are you? What was God doing? He's asking an open-ended conversation that would invite more conversation.
Okay.
He did not start with the problem. Instead, he gave them an opportunity to address the problem. Because they could have easily took responsibility. We're over here hiding. But so
you're saying don't assume,
and then ask good questions to draw out. I believe it's Proverbs talks about a wise man is able to draw out or to pull out what's within. And I think appropriate questions that are not defensive, but they are curious in nature. So you ask a question to probe and give an opportunity for the person to respond without having to be defensive. So I believe that's the a way to kind of address that. And I think, do you have something you want to add to that, Mace?
So a healthy way. My response is actually going to go towards your third question. So
okay, we just made a okay. All right. Okay, so let me
response is connected to your third one.
Okay, all right. So let me kind of deal with or a follow up. So when you say questions, I'm loving that, because one of the things that conversation and talking can do is it can give you more understanding about why it was done or exactly what was done. But you create a scenario where, as the person that was hurt, that maybe you have a better sense of how we got here. So it's not just me, bringing out my 357, but it's me really trying to understand, how do we get here? I don't like this place. I don't ever want to be here. So let me figure out how we got here. And here's the key. Let me understand your role as best I can in how we got here. And let me be humble enough to look at my role. All of that can come out if we're doing what you're suggesting, if we're discussing, if we're dialoguing, versus, an unhealthy way would be to just dismiss someone. An unhealthy way would be to inflict pain for pain. An unhealthy way would be to just emotionally cut somebody off. An unhealthy way would be to withhold sex. I mean, I've seen it all, as God has helped us work with couples, and then even in our own relationship, those moments over the years where we've not been at our best. So the key then is the word healthiest. And I want to, encourage those couples who are listening to us tonight. You have a choice about the spiritual quality of your relationship. And it's just like, going to the doctor and you're trying to get your weight together. Everybody's going to start somewhere, and that's good. And okay, so from that point moving forward, your health, your weight is going to be dependent upon your choices. And it's going to be the same with the quality of your marriage. If you start today, okay, I'm going to really try to work on this, then every day you're going to make a step toward trying to be a healthier spouse within the context of that relationship. So thank you for that whole.
So Jimmy, I do have something to add to that.
Okay.
When you were talking, I was jotting some stuff down. So when Willie's talking about asking those questions, I would say be ready for a response.
Okay.
Don't ask if you really don't want to know. Some things, depending on what has occurred, you probably don't want to know all of it. So don't ask what you really don't want to know. And then something else that you said that you guys have seen all of those things that you said were unhealthy. We have done all of those things. So hence, when I'm talking to women, I can talk to them from one of my favorite passages, 2 Corinthians 1, 3, and 4. I can comfort others the way I have been comforted. Because I've been there, done that, then I understand how I dealt with it. I may not understand exactly your situation, but I can empathize because I've been there and I've done that. we have both done everything that you just said not to do, all of the unhealthy things. Going back to, had we had premarital counseling and some instruction, we're 20 years old, coming out of a messed up dating relationship. So we had no healing before marriage. So we brought all of the mess from our dating into the marriage. So again, going back to, that premarital counseling, so that you can learn how to do those questions, how to ask those questions. But if you come in, for anyone that's young on this call, or people that are not married, or you just got married, if you don't have those skills under your belt, then you will be unhealthy. Most of us, neither one of us saw a healthy marriage. So if you are coming into a marriage and you've never seen a healthy marriage, how are you just going to assume that yours is going to be healthy just because you're both Christians? That's realistic. So definitely getting that help and getting the tools to teach us, okay, this is unhealthy. All those things you said you'll hear in any counseling session.
Right.
All the things that you said was unhealthy, you will hear it in any counseling session.
Right. And a good litmus test is, in this space specifically where Terry's talking about, you had to be a student of this whole marriage thing. And when you are earlier in your development, or maybe you're into your development and you've hit a rough patch, with all the information that's available today, there's really no excuse for you not to have some understanding about some of these things. Mm-hmm. And it's not to say that you're going to have a PhD necessarily in marriage enrichment, but what I'm saying is, between the people in your life who love and care about you, between appropriate resources that you can read and research, and getting a good therapist, there are some ways that you can get the information that you need. And I think what you're saying, Terri, is critical, is that a lot of couples don't appreciate premarital counseling and that preparation that's needed. And
after counseling. Or counseling, period.
Right. And all the things that I've ever done in ministry, my most favorite thing to do is premarital counseling. It is, because you get the opportunity to talk with couples, many which who think they already know what's necessary. Yeah. And then they find out real quickly, there's a whole nother world that I didn't know I needed to be prepared for. So it's really good. It's really good to see that. All right.
And I just want to add, Terri and Brother Mays, how is it that you guys are so charming and so decent? Like I said, I know you both. And how is it that wasn't, you didn't use those same techniques you used with me and John with each other? You said during those difficult times, how you said you had those. I'm like, how to be decent. You guys know how to be decent. So why didn't that transfer to the earlier years? I mean, you've been knowing each other since junior high. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. So again, we didn't have those skills. Okay. We weren't raised in the church. Okay. We went to a religious affiliation, because you have to go. But we didn't have a commitment to God to live our lives the way God said to. So, as you're ministering to people, not everybody's going to be in that, be where you are right now, so it's important to know. I also wrote down, you learn how to be healthy when you're unhealthy. Okay. You learn more about healthy living when you're unhealthy. Mm-hmm. So we have to learn and still are learning, because we don't have it all together. There's still some times when we do unhealthy things. And so when you realize, both of us are coming from being athletes, or, just athletes, very good athletes, had the body of an athlete. And now neither one of us have an athlete's body. So now that we can look and say, we are both unhealthy when it comes to our physical body. And so we're learning, because of the unhealthiness, how to be healthy.
Got it. Got it. Well said and well put. So let me just take a commercial break. You are with the Figueroa Church of Christ. Our podcast is entitled LA Family Life, and what we do, what we're doing for this second quarter is we're tackling issues that are relative to the health and development of families. If you're ever in Los Angeles, we want to encourage you to come visit us. We're at the corner of 57th and Figueroa. Online, our Bible class and worship start at 8:50 and 9 and 10 o'clock respectively. So prayerfully, we'll look to see you at that time. All right, so let's get back to our questions. Okay, so I have a slide that says all that. The next time I'll pull that up. Okay, so let's go with number.
John, can I add something before you?
Oh yeah,
Of course.
sure.
I think the model in Genesis chapter 3 just kind of helps us. Can I just read just a little bit?
Please, absolutely.
Further. So what God says is he asked him a good question. Where are you? It's non-defensive, but listen to what happened. And he answered, Adam answered, I heard you in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid. So he heard what Adam said, gave him the opportunity to hear what he said, but guess what God did not do? He did not remain silent. He asked another good question. He's drawing him out because then he says, and then he said, who told you that you were naked? So he's using what he heard him say, what he heard him say, and then he uses that to draw him out more. Who told you that you were naked? You said you were naked. Well, who told you? But he's asking good questions. And then he says, have you eaten from the tree that I commanded you not to eat from? So he got specific. So he asked a good question to draw him out. And once he responded to that, he asked him a more narrow question that's getting to the point. And it's either yes or no. Does that make sense? And then the man said, the woman you put here with me, she gave me some fruit from the tree and I ate it. So what he then begins to do, instead of taking responsibility, he blames her. So we got to be careful and take responsibility and not blame our spouse for our own problems. Take ownership for our actions and not try to shift blame. And I wrote a statement down here, and I just want to add this little quote. The little quote is this: where there is blame, there is no learning.
Okay.
Where there is blame, there is no learning.
Okay.
As long as I keep blaming somebody else for my actions, I don't learn from it. So I'll just stop right there. What's the healthiest way to address blame or culpability? I don't know if I went too far, but I just thought I would throw that in there, John.
So you were saying open-ended questions.
Yes,
So
open-ended
you're not
question.
going to just ask a closed-ended question where you're just going to get a yes or no. And I like how you was going through that text. Y'all know I'm married to a preacher, right? Going through that text, and that's what I was hearing, open-ended questions. As you said, the questions get more detailed. However, depending on your personality types, that might not be accepted. You know, so that's a whole nother can of worms to discuss. I'm a very detailed question person. Very detailed, and sometimes I annoy him because he's not as detailed as I am when it comes to conflict. You know, when it comes to conflict, you know, are you gonna be like Adam and start blaming, or are you going to take ownership? So again, going back to that, you know, need to know how to deal with life before you try to know how to deal with yourself before you try to jump into marriage and try to deal with somebody else.
Right. Let me add that one of the reasons why I think men, and Willie, you just kind of let me know if this is something that you've seen. One of the reasons I think that men don't want to enter that space of being open is there's a lot of fear about the question, the types of questions, the needling, just that whole pain. It's like I already feel bad that I messed up, but now I have to suffer this being interrogated, and I don't even want to do it. So, and that's that whole being emotionally vulnerable. And most of the time when I talk about being emotionally vulnerable, I talk about being emotionally responsible. And you have to have both. It's the responsible thing is to be vulnerable when your situation calls for vulnerability. It is not a very pleasing thing to go through that kind of what some would perceive as interrogation. But if that's the need, and if there are questions, if there's an explanation, then part of your being responsible is to do the best that you can to answer your spouse and to help them gain some sense of understanding of how we got here.
But also, I like when you said how God asks questions. So it's on the person that's asking the questions to ask the questions in a way that, you can get an answer. So I can't be, needling. I can't be, I have to be kind. I have to be inviting to my spouse to answer those questions. So, because it's like I said, it's easy to just go, pull out all blazes and just attack. But, it has to be some thought given. And I have to be willing to give it some thought. So I'm hearing what you're saying. So, and that's probably the hard part.
That's hard when you're in the middle. That's hard, Felicia, when you're in the middle of the pain.
Right.
That's I don't know. Well, I do know it would have been a whole different situation had God not been in the middle. Because God had done a mighty work in me. And so without Christ, this would have been a whole different story. But without Christ honing me in and teaching me how to do what you just said, Felicia, it's a process. God has to teach us, because when you're in the middle of the pain,
right,
it don't always come out so nice.
Right.
And so, and like you were saying, John, whoever has done the hurt, if it's a one-sided thing, counselors will tell you, in order to heal, you have to be willing to answer those questions.
Right.
Depending on how painful the hurt is. And let me just be specific. If you're dealing with adultery, you need to be willing to answer the questions. You have to be vulnerable, and you have to deal with the needling.
Right.
You're dealing with you keep putting the toilet paper on wrong. That's a whole different story. So when you're dealing with depending on the level of pain that you're talking about, without God in the middle,
right.
it's difficult.
Right. We have to also be willing to have the question asked. Okay. And then I have to answer it. And then what I think needs to take place is there needs to be some level of, if not validation, recognition. It's not that you have to agree with my answer, but I want you to recognize that what I'm saying in my mind and in my heart, to the best of my abilities, is the answer to whatever it is you're asking. Now, you may think it's something else, but if I'm telling you, no, this is what's happening, this is what's happened, this is how I'm being affected, then the wise spouse acknowledges that, and to the best of their abilities, they have to, have some buy-in to what they're hearing. Now, they may not like it, they may think it's a cop-out, they may, just all of those negative things, but that's a good indicator of why you're where you are today. Because something's happened in your relationship and you had no clue that your spouse felt this way, or that they were being led down this path, this carnal path So that whole self-discovery thing is not just about the erring spouse learning about what they've done. It's also the spouse who hasn't erred learning some of the dynamics of your relationship and how we got here.
Yeah.
And I think far too often couples waste a good problem. They waste a good challenge. Man, if you handle that thing right, your marriage can be so much stronger because you've weathered that storm. Now, I'm not saying it's going to be perfect, but at least you'll know, okay, we've gone through this, we've dealt through this, we've learned some skills, we've gained some skills, we've matured as a couple, and that's just going to help you moving forward. So I think that needed to be said as well, because sometimes spouses will say stuff like, you lying. It's like, wait a minute. That's why I'm not going to tell you anything, because I have to put up with you telling me that I'm lying, and I'm not lying. I'm telling you, this is why I said this, or this is why wrong or not. And so the mature spouse, I'm saying, just wants that kind of space. Just for your answer, thank you to Sister Hawkins. Thank you to Tiffany Malone for your comments on the night. Tiffany gave you a shout out on that. Where there is blame, there is no learning. And Sister Hawkins said, good to see the maze on tonight. All right, so let's go back. So what do you think about that? Do you think that you need to acknowledge and recognize what the spouse is saying? Is that important?
You want to answer first?
Yeah. Go ahead.
It's very important, John. It's also important to recognize why, if a person is saying you lying, it's probably because you lying. A lot of times it's probably because you are lying, because it goes back to what you said earlier about that fear of being vulnerable. And that fear of being vulnerable doesn't always come from your spouse. A lot of times it comes from your past, your home life, the what you've dealt with at home that you did not get the tools to deal with and heal from before you got married. And so now you're in the marriage and you used to mama or daddy saying, did you do that? And what do? You lie, or your behavior indicates, no, you've lied to me 20 other times. And you're not being honest with me. I know you're not being honest with me. Based on our history, you're not being honest. So depends on the situation. And then if you're just dealing with, this is a fresh marriage, something happened and that person ain't never lied to you supposedly before, then yes, that comes into what you're saying, John. Learn how to give each other the benefit of the doubt, which I believe is what 1 Corinthians 13, the love really means, learning how to give each other the benefit of the doubt. So you're talking about two different scenarios. You're talking about giving each other the benefit of doubt, and then you're talking about in the midst of some deep pain. Without tools, in the midst of deep pain, you won't do it right. So it's depending on what the situation is. But yes, absolutely, giving each other the benefit of the doubt. But then on the other flip side, learning, like Willie said, ask those open-ended questions so that you can get to okay, I'm understanding that you dealt with this at home. And so therefore you think I'm attacking you, so you don't feel like you can be honest with me. Or you feel like if I answer that question and I'm going to get, your term was needled. And so you kind of, it's because of your past oftentimes, not necessarily because of your marriage. So again, getting that, if you don't have those tools beforehand.
It's just hard to develop them on the fly.
You're going to be doing this.
Right. Very good. All right. Okay, let's go on to that to the next question. So give me one second here. All right, give me 1 second here. All right, you go to the next question, sweetie.
Okay. What role does self-examination play in understanding and managing marital conflict? What role does self-examination play? So, and I think, Terry, you led into that nicely.
That's why I said I'm a person that is I'm a firm believer in checking myself. Firm believer. God has taught me a lot from my mistakes. He's taught me a lot from doing it wrong. You know, the more I hear lessons, and not only just from the Bible and reading the Bible for myself and praying for myself, I place myself, God has blessed me to place myself in the midst of other women, Titus 2 sisters, you know, other people who have experienced life, and I've learned a lot. So I learned to check myself. And my ministry to women is always your relationship with God, your vertical relationship needs to be on point in order for this horizontal relationship to be any better. So you have to check yourself. You know, I think it's extremely important. No matter what happened, check yourself, because you are responsible. I am responsible to ultimately to God first.
Mhm.
So if I'm acting a nut just because you acted a nut, I'm just as wrong as you are.
Right.
So self-examination is extremely important.
In my training as a chaplain, we had these modules that we had to learn. And unlike your classic pastoral training, your classic chaplain oriented training is really geared toward the health of the minister or the pastor in the denominational world. And the thinking is that if you're not where you need to be, then how could you lead somebody else, down a path of self-discovery? Well, the most difficult module that we had, and I'm just talking about my cohort, was the module on self-examination.
Mhm.
And I learned the concept of blind spots, where when you have a classic blind spot, as well-intentioned as you are, you can't see what others can see and so obvious about yourself.
Right.
So you really have to learn how to critique yourself and how to create ways and avenues where you can get an honest, unfettered opinion about how you're coming across. What's the energy that you're giving off, and just a lot of us, I think, can be so prideful that even when there is a breakdown, that we really think that I can come out of this without any kind of knowledge about myself in areas that I need to grow.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that I want to encourage our viewers, as you may be in the midst of a crisis, and I'm not even thinking about right now about the spouse that's messed up, that's committed the sin or that's made the mistake. I'm talking about you, and you really having a sense of what role did I play in this. And I'll give you an example. This couple I was working with, they were maturing, and her whole mindset around sex changed. And she went from a person that enjoyed it repeatedly to a person now that, it just wasn't something that she thought about. She changed. He never changed. So when they finally came and talked to me about the matter, her thing was, well, you have to deal with it. And I said to myself, that's such a callous, hard-hearted, insensitive way to talk about something. Well, if you know Harley's 5 needs, one of his needs is sex. That's basic to a man's need, is sex. So for you to say that part no longer is something I'm even going to consider, and not dialogue about it, not have a conversation about it. So part of what the process was administering to this couple was to try to get her to see how it was affecting him. And I'm, grateful that we were able to gain some ground there. But that's often what can happen is things can happen, and it could be a physiological thing. Maybe there are some things with your hormones, or, maybe I have some kind of physical condition now, things are different. But to not be aware of how I'm thinking and what I'm doing and what I'm bringing to the table, I think is a recipe for disaster.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Go. Yeah, but let me go back to
No,
where.
you go with you.
Yeah, but I know. Turn the question down.
Oh,
I want to see the question. Okay. Go back. Go back.
All right, so that was number 3 about self-examination.
We're trying to get that question. He wants to see that question one more time.
Okay, all right. So what role does self-examination play in understanding and managing marital conflict?
Yes. And Terri talked about checking. And Terri, you're you play basketball, you star basketball player. So what does that look like when you checking? When we say check, what does that mean? How can that be translated to the marital situation? Like I said, I know you and Willie, so you have such. It's like you said you didn't know, but I'm saying you were primed. Just because of how you live, it's easier to internalize. So when you see how God said to do it, you can give practical examples because of your experience.
Right.
As far as an athlete, a basketball star. So what does that look like when you're checking? You take the ball out and you let someone check the ball. What does that look like in marriage? Can you give an analogy or?
Yeah. I think when you check, it's that first you got to start with yourself. Am I telling the truth? Because if I'm being deceptive, then it's going to cause more conflict in the marriage itself. Just like when Adam went from answering the question to blaming, he was shifting the burden rather than accepting his share of what he had done. He didn't take ownership. So when we don't check ourselves and take ownership, we create more problems by shifting blame as if it's her fault. When I knew all along what I had done, but I didn't take responsibility because I'm trying to connive and hide rather than tell the truth.
Right.
The scriptures are very clear. The truth is what sets us free.
Right.
And when we fail to tell truth, it's then that the Holy Spirit begins to burden us, as we see in David. As long as he remained silent about his sin, David talked about that inner groaning on the inside, like he was wasting away. Why? You're talking about depression and anxiety and everything else, because I don't want to be found out. I don't want nobody to find out. I don't want to take responsibility. I'll keep lying and lying and lying. But lying until you tell the truth will not liberate you and set you free again. So I think when you talk about this question, and I go back to the question, when I think about this question, if I don't tell the truth to my spouse, I am responsible for what I have done to break that bond. And it's only through telling the truth that I can really manage that conflict. Because God is going to allow the conflict to increase so that I can be set free. So I think that's important, that I have to take responsibility, take ownership, no matter how bad it is. Take my own responsibility, do a personal inventory. When I tell the truth and I am a truth teller, that's what's going to set me free. And then, John, going back to you, I don't have to lie to her in order for us to lie to her is to break that bond
Mm-hmm.
and to keep that disconnect, the emotional disconnect. Because she's smart enough, she knows me.
Mm-hmm.
When she talking about, I know your history. Okay, so she's looking, she's seeing sign, so she's discerning. So I don't want to discount what she says. If for me, it's finding a way to tell the truth. That means if I have to go to the therapist, which I have, but she went first. Because guess what? I was bound and determined that I wasn't going to tell the truth. She went to the therapist first. And when she went to the therapist, they called me in. And then it was like being under the conviction of the word of God. It kept cutting me back and forth. And I'm like, man, God, you sure you calling me to do ministry? Yeah, I'm calling you to do ministry in your brokenness, just as you are, because I know I can mend you, I can mold you, I can make you whole again. But guess what? You got to tell the truth.
Right.
You know, tell the truth, accept responsibility. So I think that's so important to managing the conflict. Is first, I got to be a truth teller.
Yeah, and man, I'm telling you, that whole truth thing, it really is underrated.
Yeah, it is.
You
And,
know,
and
when you
John,
can,
I was gonna say again, you know, like Willie's talking about like the things that we've gone through, and he's not. This is not hypothetical. This is us. You know, so it didn't come from me. It didn't come from our marriage, and I didn't know that. So these are things that he's had to learn, things that I've had to learn. I was not raised with a man, so I'm strong-willed. You know, that submission word. The Lord had to teach me. You know, so you know him coming from that side of the world. You know, the deception and not feeling comfortable telling the truth, and me on the other side being like, you know, just punching. You know, punching. Our personalities were so different that we were not being healthy for each other, you know, because we were so different the way we handled things without the tools that you need to know how to, without the knowledge of each other's pain. You know, if you don't know each other's hurts and habits and hangups before you get married, or when you get married, you're not discussing, you're not figuring out what are those things that you may have an issue with, and what are the things that I may have an issue with. You know, so without having that knowledge, without having those tools to deal with that, you will clash. You will either clash, or someone will bow down and will become invisible and lose themselves, which is usually the female, not always, but lose yourself, and then something worse happens. So managing, like Willie said, you know, managing the conflict to me has to start with me.
yeah.
It has to start with me.
If you don't learn how to manage your conflict is going to manage you.
Absolutely.
There's no getting around it. And the sooner that couples can embrace the conflict and try to get on top of it, get the skills, even if it's in the middle of, to learn how to fight through all the things that want to keep you from, getting healthy in that space. So I just want to encourage all of our couples to hang in there. All right. So we're trying to work through these 5 questions. Looks like, I don't know that we're going to get to all of them. So real quickly, are there any perfect spouses? And I'd like for Terri to answer that. No.
So we can move to the last one. That answers that, and we all know that's a no.
Well, there are. You said, are there any?
Perfect.
Right.
Spouse.
Yeah, the spouse.
People.
Yeah, the spouse.
Oh, you talking about
Jesus.
Oh, right.
Jesus was
Jesus. Good answer. Good answer.
All right. And
his bride is the church. God.
And I have to remind couples of that there are no perfect spouses. And as great as you think you are, as wonderful, and I'm a great communicator, you just have your resume, there's always some area for growth. And the fact that oftentimes we can't articulate that is usually indicative of a pride issue. But we all have some spaces where we need to, tighten some things up. All right. Well, the last question we have for tonight is speak to younger couples who have yet to experience significant adversity. What word of encouragement would you give them? So speak to younger couples, brother, sister Mays, who have yet to experience significant adversity. What word of encouragement would you give? If you could please answer that for us.
I would say it begins with having a mindset that you're in this for life. So there are no outs. That means you work through whatever you encounter and you turn to God to help you, even when you're ready to throw in the towel. So that's just my 2 cents. And I was just going to say, with Terri and I, there have been many opportunities that we could have called it off. We stayed focused on God, and He's the one that brought us through it all. God will teach you in the midst of your partnering with Him how to work through that stuff. And I'm not saying there's no reasons why you can't do something different or it may come to something else, but we were committed and we didn't have perfect models, but we relied on a perfect God. And He carried us through all of our mess. And as Terri says, we let God turn our mess into a ministry. And so I'll let her go ahead and do what she does.
What I would say to young people, whether you are getting married or you are young in your marriage, there's 2 things that can mess any relationship up, and that's selfishness and I wrote it down: selfishness and stubbornness. So if I'm stubborn, and no matter what you say, I'm not changing, I ain't fixing nothing, I ain't going to no counselor. No, I ain't going to no counselor. Don't nobody need to be in my business. That's stubborn and not wanting to be wrong, being stubborn and being selfish, wanting everything my way. Philippians 2 reminds us that I'm supposed to think about you. Willie just mentioned one of my songs. If you listen to my songs and you really listen to my songs, you will know how I've made it. My song from Philippians 2, if I think of you and you think of me, we'll all have met needs and we'll be okay. We don't have to be, we should not be selfish and wanting just everything for me. So don't be selfish and don't be stubborn. Get help so that you can learn how to be better. And another song that I wrote is called Put Jesus Before Me. Jesus has to be first in your life. You have to be whole first before you can come together with another person. Because a piece and a piece, it may sound like it makes a whole, but you just got 2 messed up pieces. So you have to be whole yourself before you try to come into a marriage and expect things to be whole. Don't expect your husband to be your God. Take him off of God's pedestal and put Jesus first, and let that relationship guide how you respond, how you react, how you handle things. Because you're talking about honesty. We're talking about honesty. I know women and men who are not, you don't just be dishonest by saying, no, I didn't do that. You're also dishonest when you take on ownership for everything. Well, It was my fault. She wouldn't have done that if I hadn't. He wouldn't have done it if I hadn't. That's a codependent, abused, emotional abused mindset. So honesty on both parts is very important. So put Jesus first in your life, and don't be stubborn, and don't be selfish.
Hey, John, I know you got to go. Can I just please three quick points?
Yeah, go ahead.
3 quick points. Number
Preach it.
1, address your past. Number 2, assess your present. Number 3, actualize your future.
Did y'all get them 3 points? The preacher man. Preacher man.
Address your past. And then I said, assess your present.
Okay.
And actualize your future.
Okay.
All right. All right. Well,
Yes,
thank you. Thank you, Brother Sister Mays, Brother Hawkins. Brother Hawkins says, thank you for your openness and good biblical teaching, guys. Sister Drea said she loved your answer. And then Sister Sharika said, put that in the chat. Okay. All right. So let me try to put it in the chat. All right. So give me just a moment. Let me see here. Okay. So let's do it again. You said address your past.
Assess your present.
Assess your present.
And then actualize your future.
Actualize your future. Future. Address your past. Assess your present. Actualize your future. All right. All right. So, all right. Here we go. Here it is. Right here. All right. So there we go. All right. Okay. Sister Sharika said this was amazing. I will definitely log in for the next session. This was needed. The next session, we're going to have some preachers' kids who are going to talk about child rearing. And they're really talking about their child rearing, some things they experienced, some things we learned, some things we don't want to repeat with our own kids. And so it's going to be a very good way, I think, for us to embrace our younger years. My sister, all the way out of Cincinnati, Dr. Thurgood Lane, is going to be one of our guests. Also, Daryl Winrow, who's out of the greater Dallas area, and then Geraldine Fox, who's also living in Texas, and her mom, her folks, brother, are the Dansbys out of Shreveport. So we have, I think, some good diversity. So we're looking forward to that. That's going to be next week. Thank you so much, Willie and Terri. We love you. We appreciate you. The time tonight has been so needed, and we look forward to seeing you again. So anything you want to add, sweetie, before we sign off?
Just like I said, thank you for being great people.
Thank you all for this invitation, and we appreciate it. And John, just one thing, we know that God has given us an out in our marriage. So I don't want to cause any guilt trips. I just think people need to be, when you've tried everything and it doesn't get better, maybe God is giving you an alternative. And if that's what you need to use, allow God to help you through the mess, because then he can make you new all over again. So I'm just saying that God has an option there. So I don't want to say that it's not there, but that's just a tough decision that you have to make. And I just received a comment that made me remember that sometimes people just don't make it because their spouse refuses to change.
Right. Now you can watch the podcast again as soon as we end the session. You're welcome to watch it again from the beginning for those who joined late. It's good to see Kelly Kelly Neal, all the way out of Florida, one of my favorite artists, just a wonderful, wonderful person. She's so humorous. And then we have one of the members here at Figueroa, Sister Choctaw, who's with us tonight. So it's just so good. We appreciate the support. Have a wonderful evening, our viewing audience, and meet us here next week, 7 o'clock, LA Family Live for the Figueroa Church of Christ. God bless. And Willie, if you don't mind, you think you can say a closing prayer for our couples and for our marriages that are struggling right now? If you don't mind, please.
Yes. Heavenly Father, we are so grateful for John and Felicia, for their work, dear Father, with addressing these family issues that are relevant, that are real, dear Father. And at the same time, dear Father, they can cause us to knock us off of our feet. But God, I pray that you would help every individual to make first and foremost your word, and that they might seek you, dear Father, in the midst of their marriage, in the midst of their circumstances, that they'll always submit to you, dear Father, knowing it's not always going to be easy, but Father, that you can work things out. And Father, if things don't work out in the most perfect way, you still have an alternative. And I pray that we understand, dear Father, as long as we submit to your word and we're in agreement with your word, let us align ourselves and allow you, dear Father, to cause us to flourish, to bring you glory, bring you honor, bring you praise, no matter our circumstances, because we want to glorify you and hear you say, well done, thy good and faithful servant. Bless these marriages, bless these homes, bless these children, bless our nation. And Father, may we submit to your will, your word, and your way. In Jesus' name, I offer this prayer and thank you for John and Felicia and this ministry. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Amen. All right. Have a good night, everybody.
Love you both.
Take care. Love you both.
Love y'all.
All right. Take care.